There's a debate about how to pronounce Qatar, but it doesn't rhyme with guitar. That's the wrong one. Qatar, Qatar, but it can't rhyme with guitar, so not Qatar. Unless you're President Trump, because he got permission.
Qatar, as I say, I call it Qatar, you call it Qatar. You're actually more right, but actually you're allowed to go. The Emir said you can say it any way you want, but I've always thought of it as Qatar.
Raise your hand if you know who this is. Raise your hand high if you know who this is. And put your hand down if you were in a session with me already or you saw my reel on this subject. And this is the guy who gave President Trump permission to pronounce Qatar or Qatar however he wants. This is the Emir of Qatar, Al Thani. If you don't know who he is, the point of this session is that you should know who he is. Because the Emir of Qatar is waging a massive information warfare campaign against Israel, against the Jewish people, that you are feeling on campus. And he's waging his information warfare campaign so well that most of you don't know who he is. So let's talk a bit about Qatar. My volunteer. Come close to me though. Do you need another volunteer for to hold the other side?
I can hold the bottom. Does that help?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah, that's awesome. We're gonna fake it here. That's good. That's perfect. You getting a workout?
Great.
Higher for everyone to see.
Yeah, we can do that. We can
That's
do that.
In that case, you might want
Oh, that's much smarter. There we go.
We didn't rehearse this. I bought this yesterday on Amazon. It was delivered to Whole Foods. I picked it up, unrolled it. Map of the Middle East. The map is everything. You can't understand anything about Qatar unless you understand the map. Where's Qatar? It's right here. So let's orient ourselves. Here's Israel, Mediterranean Sea. Big country, Saudi Arabia, Iran. And there's a little peninsula here called Qatar. You know how to say peninsula in Arabic? Jazeera. Qatar is right there. Now, Qatar is a country with 300,000 or so citizens. Qatar is a country with 300,000 citizens. They're 10% of the country. Everyone else who lives in Qatar is a foreign worker or a tourist. So 300,000 citizens of Qatar. Across the Persian Gulf is the country of Iran, which has 90 million citizens. And next to Qatar on the land border, Saudi Arabia, which has 20 million citizens. So you've got big country here, 20 million, 300,000, 90 million. And there's Qatar, little peninsula of Saudi Arabia. Now Qatar doesn't get along so well with its neighbors. They have some rivalries, especially with Saudi Arabia, with the UAE. About a decade ago, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Bahrain, they put a siege on Qatar. They were so irritated with Qatar's behavior that they put a siege on Qatar. So that's kind of been forgotten in the past 10 years, but they tried to change Qatari behavior by putting a siege on Qatar. So we understand Qatar doesn't really trust Saudi Arabia and vice versa, even though they're neighbors and maybe in public they may shake hands and smile. They don't really like each other, so keep that in mind. And across the water here is Iran, which is a Shia Muslim country. Qatar is Sunni. And since 1979, Iran has been governed by the theocrats, the mullahs. Islamic Revolution, Revolutionary Guard. And Qatar's in the middle of this. 20 million people, citizens in Saudi Arabia, 90 million in Iran, 300,000 in Qatar. Now, you wouldn't think, based on what I've told you so far, that Qatar has any relevance or power. How does it have relevance or power? Al Jazeera is not free. Oil and gas, specifically gas. They have oil, but natural gas. And the biggest natural gas field in the world is where I'm putting my finger. It's off the coast of Qatar in the Persian Gulf. It's called the South Pars North gas field. Biggest gas field in the world, natural gas right here. Qatar controls half of it. Who controls the other half? Iran. So Qatar half, Iran half. 300,000 country controls half, 90 million country controls the other half. If Qatar wants to be able to get its gas out, it needs to have some kind of arrangement with the powerful country that controls the other half, Iran. And they do. They have an arrangement. They don't love Iran, they don't love the Revolutionary Guard, but that's the reality they're dealing with as a small, weak country. How do they get the gas to market? How do they get their product out? One option you might think, okay, Qatar's right here, they can pipe it any direction here, through Saudi Arabia. They don't want to do that. because that means they're relying completely on Saudi Arabia for getting their product to market, and they have problems with Saudi Arabia. So no, they don't pipe the gas this way. They turn the gas into liquid. It's called liquefied natural gas, LNG. It's 1/600th smaller by volume when you turn the natural gas into a liquid. So it's much more efficient, actually, to turn it into a liquid. They put it on ships. Now you're a ship in the Persian Gulf. How do you get out? How do you sail to the world? Strait of Hormuz. Relevant? Qatar needs the Strait of Hormuz open, and it needs to have an arrangement with Iran in order to be wealthy and powerful. So if I've only told you a little bit about the geopolitics, you'd understand that Qatar has an interest in not undermining Iran. In 2020, Israel and the UAE and Bahrain signed what's called the Abraham Accords. Qatar perceived the Abraham Accords as an anti-Iran alliance. Were they wrong? They were not wrong. The Abraham Accords is a coalition of the Jewish state and Sunni Arab Muslim conservative countries against Iran, because other countries in the region are very worried about Iran and they don't have the kind of arrangement that Qatar has. So Qatar saw the Abraham Accords happening, an anti-Iran alliance. If this alliance comes together and undermines Iran, then we have a problem. So Qatar threw everything it had against the Abraham Accords. And we haven't said anything about the religious views of the royal family of Qatar. They are Muslim, but a specific kind of Muslim. They're quite sympathetic to an organization called the Muslim Brotherhood. The Muslim Brotherhood is an Islamic political movement that seeks to insert their interpretation of Islam into all elements of public life. The Palestinian branch of the Muslim Brotherhood is called Hamas. So the Qataris like Hamas. On October 7th, where were the leaders of Hamas? In Qatar. Very interesting. Qatar condemned Israel on October the 7th. Qatar has an interest in undermining Arab-Israeli peace, and the thing that they were the most afraid of was that Saudi Arabia would come into the Abraham Accords. If Saudi Arabia joined the Abraham Accords, that would be the end of the Arab-Israeli conflict. You'd have an Iran-Israel conflict, you'd have an Israeli-Palestinian conflict, but if Saudi Arabia joins the Abraham Accords, that's a huge blow to Qatar and its interests, because that is a much bigger, stronger coalition against Iran, which Qatar needs to have an arrangement with so that it can be relevant at all. October 3rd, 2023. The man underneath my finger, his name is Shlomo Karchi. He is a minister in the current Israeli government from the ruling Likud party. This photograph, October 3rd, 2023, is in Saudi Arabia. You know what this picture is? This is the Jewish holiday of Sukkot, which was taking place at that time. An Israeli government minister is publicly in Saudi Arabia for a visit. What did this picture mean? It meant, if you look at the news the first week of October 2023, Israel and Saudi Arabia are figuring it out. They're going to come to some kind of arrangement that sees them establish open and normal relations and form an alliance against the threat of Iran. This photo was hugely concerning to the Qataris, and we didn't know it at the time, but Yahya Sinwar had already set his plan in motion to stop this from happening. This was 4 days before October 7th. But this is where we were the first week of October, and this is everything that Qatar wants to undermine. Now, how do they undermine it? They're a country of 300,000 people. They share a tiny land border with Saudi Arabia. They have to be really smart if they want to have enough influence to undermine Saudi Arabia, Israel. And the way that Qatar does this is through, you could call it soft power, I call it information warfare. Qatar is waging a massive information warfare campaign led by this guy, the Emir of Qatar.